He painted the most famous smile in human history. He designed a helicopter 500 years before one ever flew. He dissected over 30 human corpses, not because anyone asked him to, but because he had to know. He left dozens of masterpieces unfinished, drove patrons to frustration, and still became the most universally celebrated genius who ever lived. How does a man denied a formal education and barred from respectable guilds become Leonardo da Vinci? Was it divine intervention, supernatural intellect, or was it something written into the very blueprint of who he was, before he ever picked up a brush? Today, we decode the life of Leonardo da Vinci through the lens of human design. And what we find will change how you see genius forever. Human design is a synthesis of ancient and modern wisdom that maps out your unique energetic blueprint. It tells you how your energy operates, how you're designed to make decisions, and what happens when you live out of alignment with your nature. Think of it as an instruction manual for your soul, one that most of us never receive. Leonardo, of course, never had access to it. But here's what's remarkable. His life demonstrated its principles with extraordinary precision. Based on his birth date, April 15, 1452, in Vinci, in the Republic of Florence, Leonardo's human design reveals him as a generator with sacral authority and a 4-6 profile, the opportunist role model. Now, because we don't have a confirmed birth time for Leonardo, historical records give us the third hour of the night, roughly 9:40 to 10:30 p.m. Some elements of his chart involve a degree of interpretation. But his type, his authority, and his profile, these paint a picture that is almost startlingly on point. Let's begin at the beginning. Leonardo di Ser Piero da Vinci entered the world on a Saturday evening in April 1452, in or near the small hilltop town of Vinci, outside Florence. His grandfather recorded the birth in a family diary with quiet pride. A grandson of mine was born, son of Ser Piero, on the 15th of April, a Saturday, at the third hour of the night. But the circumstances of that birth were complicated. Leonardo was illegitimate, the son of a prosperous Florentine notary, Ser Piero da Vinci, and a peasant woman named Caterina. His parents never married each other. Within a year, both had moved on to other partners. Leonardo grew up in his grandfather Antonio's household, surrounded by farmland, and raised in part by an uncle, Francesco, who shared his love of nature. Here is where human design gets interesting. Generators, Leonardo's type, are built to respond, not to initiate, not to force. Their signature energy is generative and sustainable, but it activates most powerfully in response to life presenting them with something worth engaging. The sacral center, when lit up with a genuine yes, produces an almost inexhaustible current of life force. Young Leonardo had almost no conventional structure pressing him toward a predetermined path. No guild inheritance, no clear career trajectory. His illegitimate status during that time period actually blocked him from the standard routes. He couldn't easily enter the legal profession like his father, and formal Latin education, the gateway to academic life, was largely closed to him. In human design terms, that absence of imposed conditioning was an invitation to respond authentically. And a generator with an open path ahead of them, free to follow the sacral's pull, is capable of extraordinary things. His uncle Francesco nurtured his curiosity about the natural world, plants, animals, the flow of water. Leonardo later wrote in his notebooks that nature was his first and greatest teacher. This is deeply characteristic of a generator following their inner response, drawn not by obligation but by a lit-up, alive sense of this. Yes, this. It's worth noting that Leonardo was born with his sun in Taurus, an earth sign known for patient sensory engagement with the physical world. His Chiron, the wounded healer asteroid, sat in a position associated with early wounds around belonging and legitimacy. The illegitimate child who doesn't quite fit anywhere, the one who must forge his own path because the conventional ones are barred. That wound, and the extraordinary gifts it forced into bloom, would define everything. Around age 14, something happened that would alter the course of history. Ser Piero recognized his son's remarkable talent and arranged for him to apprentice with Andrea del Verrocchio, the leading sculptor, painter, and metalsmith in Florence. This is the first great sacral response of Leonardo's documented life. For a generator, apprenticeship under someone truly excellent in a field that genuinely lights them up is not work, it is fuel. Leonardo didn't just learn to paint in Verrocchio's workshop, he learned bronze casting, anatomy, engineering, the behavior of light on curved surfaces. He stayed for over a decade, even after joining the Painters Guild in 1472. The sacral said yes, and Leonardo stayed. His 4-6 profile tells us something essential here. The fourth line, the opportunist, is someone whose opportunities, connections, and breakthroughs come through their network. Not through cold strategy or relentless self-promotion, but through genuine relationship. The fourth line needs people who believe in them. And the workshop of Verrocchio, nested in the heart of Medici Florence, surrounded by artists, philosophers, and patrons. That was the network Leonardo's fourth line was designed to inhabit. By his mid-20s, Leonardo had become an independent master. And in 1476, when he was 24, his personal life took a turbulent turn. He was charged in Florence with a serious accusation that was ultimately dropped but cast a shadow over his standing. For a fourth-line profile, whose foundation rests entirely on the trust and reliability of their network, this was a genuine threat to his sense of security. It is perhaps no coincidence that shortly afterward, we see Leonardo beginning to turn his gaze outward, toward Milan, toward possibility, toward a new network entirely. In 1482, around age 30, Leonardo did something extraordinary. He wrote a letter to Ludovico Sforza, the Duke of Milan, marketing himself primarily as a military engineer. He described portable bridges, bombardment machines, armored vehicles, warships. Almost as an afterthought, he mentioned he could also paint. He brought with him, as a gift, a silver lute in the shape of a horse's head, which he had made himself. This moment marks what human design recognizes as a pivotal threshold. Around age 28 to 30, most people encounter what human design calls the Saturn return. Saturn completing its first full orbit back to its position at your birth. It's the great cosmic audit. Who are you actually? Is the life you're building truly yours? For many, it's a crisis. For some, it's the launch. For Leonardo, it appears to have been both. Leaving Florence for Milan at 30 represented his first great reinvention. And in Milan, under Sforza's patronage, the full scope of what Leonardo was designed for began to emerge. For 17 years, from roughly 1482 to 1499, Leonardo served as Sforza's chief engineer, architect, event designer, court entertainer, weapons developer, and painter. He painted the Virgin of the Rocks. He designed elaborate pageants. He began his systematic study of anatomy, water, geology, and flight. And here, the generator's core dynamic becomes impossible to miss. Leonardo was famously, legendarily, unable to finish things. The monks of San Donato commissioned the adoration of the Magi from him in 1481. He abandoned it. Sforza waited over 15 years for Leonardo to complete an equestrian statue. It was never cast. The list of unfinished commissions is staggering. But this wasn't laziness. It wasn't lack of capability. It was the generator's deepest tension. The sacral response moves. When it says yes, the energy is total. But when a new stimulus arrives, when curiosity catches fire in a new direction, the old yes becomes a quiet, not a no, just a silence. And the generator, when not yet wise to their own mechanics, follows that new current. What Leonardo called his restless curiosity, what his patrons called his infuriating inconstancy, was his sacral authority operating at full volume, without a filter. His notebooks make this viscerally clear. He would begin a note on water, veer into the mechanics of the eye, spiral into a meditation on the soul, sketch a device for walking on water, calculate the force of a river's current, and end with a reminder to buy himself a pair of boots, all on the same page. This is not a mind out of control. This is a sacral center responding to the universe, again and again, in real time. Around age 40 to 42, another seismic transit arrives for every person. The Uranus opposition. Uranus, the planet of awakening, disruption, and individuation, reaches the exact opposite point in the sky from where it was at your birth. It is the cosmos tapping you on the shoulder and asking, are you actually living your truth? Or have you been performing someone else's version of you? In 1499, when Leonardo was 47, the French invaded Milan. Sforza's court collapsed. The bronze for the great equestrian statue, years in preparation, was melted down for cannons. And just like that, the 17-year chapter was over. Leonardo returned to Florence as the most celebrated painter alive, but something had shifted. The sixth line of his 4-6 profile was beginning its second movement. In human design, the sixth line moves through 3 distinct phases. The first phase, roughly through age 30, is characterized by trial and error, bold experimentation, testing everything. The second phase, from roughly 30 to 50, is known as going on the roof. The sixth line withdraws slightly. It observes. It watches from a distance while others engage in the chaos below. It is a time of integration, of making meaning from all that trial and error, of building the inner architecture that will eventually become wisdom. This is precisely what we see in Leonardo's middle years. Back in Florence in 1500, he began working on the Virgin and Child with Saint Anne. He served briefly as a military engineer under the notorious Cesare Borgia. He was appointed to a committee helping to place Michelangelo's newly completed David. He began, around 1503, what would become the Mona Lisa, a painting he worked on, returned to, and carried with him until his death. He was no longer the restless apprentice. He was becoming something else. In his 50s, Leonardo moved through several courts, Milan under French rule, Rome under papal patronage. Always observing, always studying, always filling notebooks. His anatomical work reached its apex during this period. He dissected corpses by candlelight and produced drawings of the human body so precise that surgeons would still be learning from them centuries later. The channel of awareness, gates 61 to 24 in human design, associated with the movement from the unknown into knowing, from cosmic mystery into mental understanding, resonates powerfully through Leonardo's relentless drive to bridge the visible and invisible worlds. He didn't just want to paint what the eye sees. He wanted to understand why it sees it, what the light is doing, what the muscle beneath the cheek is doing when a person smiles, what the soul is doing when the body moves. That is the channel of awareness, alive in a human life. In 1516, Leonardo accepted an invitation from the French king Francis II. He was 64 years old, well into the third phase of his sixth line. The role model fully emerged. He traveled to the Château du Clos Lucé in Amboise, France with 3 paintings, the Virgin and Child with Saint Anne, Saint John the Baptist, and the Mona Lisa. He was given a manor house, a generous salary, and an official title, Premier Painter, Engineer, and Architect of the King. But more than that, he was given something rare. Francis visited him almost daily, not to commission work, but simply to talk. The young king wanted to be near him, to absorb his perspective, to sit with someone who had seen so much, learned so much, synthesized so much. The role model doesn't have to perform, they simply have to be. Leonardo da Vinci died on May 2, 1519, at the age of 67, reportedly in Francis's arms, though historians note that's likely romantic legend. He left behind thousands of notebook pages, a handful of completed paintings, and a vision of the world that we are still catching up to. Here is what human design reveals about the architecture of that legacy. He was a generator who spent his life responding to beauty, to mystery, to the next burning question. When he honored that response, he produced work of transcendent power. When he was forced or pressured into projects that didn't light him up, he abandoned them. He was a 4-6 profile who built his genius through networks: Verrocchio's workshop, the Medici Circle, Sforza's court, the French royal household, and who spent his middle years quietly ascending to the roof, watching, integrating, becoming wise. Then, in his final years, he descended as a role model who changed a young king's understanding of what a human mind could be. He was a sacral authority who trusted, not always consciously, not always gracefully, but fundamentally and consistently, his own inner response over the expectations of the world. He didn't live his design perfectly, no one does, but he lived it loudly, and the world has never forgotten it. 500 years later, we look at his notebooks and we feel it. That electric current of a life fully, restlessly, beautifully engaged with its own truth. That is what quantum sovereignty looks like. That is what it means to architect your own reality. So what do we take from Leonardo's life? A generator who chases what lights him up, even when it looks irrational, even when patrons are waiting, even when convention says to stay the course, doesn't just survive. He creates the Mona Lisa. He sketches the first helicopter. He maps the human heart with the precision of a surgeon and the reverence of a poet. A 4-6 profile who trusts the network, goes through the necessary seasons of trial and retreat, and allows the role model to emerge in its own time. Doesn't just age. He becomes the kind of person that kings travel to simply to be near. And a sacral authority who learns to listen to that quiet, bodily, gut-deep yes or no, doesn't just make decisions. He makes history. Leonardo didn't know human design, but his life demonstrates its deepest truth. That when you stop trying to be who the world expects and start responding to who you actually are, extraordinary things become not just possible, but inevitable. Here's the question we want to leave you with. What might become possible if you understood your own energetic blueprint as deeply as we've just understood Leonardo's? Because here's the thing, Leonardo navigated his design unconsciously. He fumbled, he frustrated people, he left masterpieces half-painted. Imagine what becomes available when you understand your own mechanics consciously. When you know your type, your authority, your profile, and you have the tools to actually live from that place. That is precisely what our free clarity quiz is designed to help you begin to explore. If today's episode sparked something in you, a recognition, a question, a quiet that sounds like you, we want you to follow that response. Click the link below to take the free clarity quiz and start decoding your own sovereign blueprint. Subscribe, leave a comment telling us what historical figure's design you'd like us to decode next, and we'll see you in the next episode of Human Design Profiles, Decoding Famous Lives. Because the most important blueprint you'll ever study is your own.